Everyone always starts, no, let me correct that. The mind always starts with assumptions. Assumptions are tar on the road thoughts tread, which doesn't exist. When's the last time you heard someone exclaim in a tone of discovery, well, no wonder I'm not getting anywhere? And they knew what they were talking about. When? Never. It's nice to start off on a story that is so obvious and transparent, right? Never. Oh. One creature who tried to achieve fame among lions but failed, then strove for it among pigs and still flopped. And his father came to see him, offering this counsel. What's to be had in becoming envied when it is only those at the bottom of the intellectual bucket who envy? And the creature recognized the ring of veracity, yet said, even though that may be, Father, still I cannot stop myself from so wanting. And the father replied, then why not try admiring yourself? And his progeny answered, but I am not sure what myself is. I suspect that is why I seek the attention of others, so as to make clear to me who I am. And the father thought to himself, well, at least he didn't say to make clear to me who I really am. And the offspring grew agitated, saying, don't stand there thinking important things just to yourself. Come on, out with it. Tell me what it is you're thinking. But the elder was silent, realizing that under the circumstances he had already given more attention to the youth than he could profitably handle. On a faraway world was once a man who wrote stories, and sometimes after writing one he'd read it and think, what the hell does that mean? But it didn't matter. He was the one who wrote it. Get it? It's the mind. The mind. It's always the mind. One man's latest suspicion, perhaps the only way to truly be me, is to never think me. God, mused an out-of-town thought, what is better than a good old-fashioned suspicion? One man lived with his brother. Then he lived by himself. Then he lived with his brother again. And then by himself. Then with his brother again, and then by himself again, until he got to a place where he lost interest in the whole affair. After he died, an angel asked a man what living a human life was like. And the man shook his head, saying, to describe what life was like back on planet Earth would require a far less intelligent mind than mine. Headline, grand and not so grand scales and the matters of weight and obstructions to sight. One man said that for a long time he believed he had made real progress. One man said that for a long time he believed he was safely in his back pocket, in that he no longer thought that there is some point to life. But then he said he became aware that he still thought there was some point to each day, and that was what was now knocking him off a steady gait. One night while asleep, a man dreamed that he was in bed asleep and dreaming. And in this dream, he was talking to a man who used a word that at first he didn't recognize. And when he asked the other man to spell the word and he began, the dreamer realized that what the word was, but was also startled by the fact that the man in his dream commenced to spell the word incorrectly. Well, as you might imagine, this immediately caused the dreamer to awaken. And he sat there for a long time, alone in the dark, in his bed, as he pondered just how stupid did that make him, that someone in his dream misspelled a word that he knew. God. Normally I just don't pay much attention. I just read through the news like any good anchor. But sometimes some of what occurs in life, some of these stories are just, I don't know, just heartbreaking. I don't know what else to say. To think and talk about things, you must make allowances. To see what's going on requires none. Ask yourself, what allowances do what's going on make for what's going on? As he stuck life in the eye, the man said, "Oops, I slipped." And life responded, "You can't slip unless I slip." So the man said, "Oops, you slipped." To which life countered, "I can't stick myself in the eye." And the man said, "Okay, oops, I slipped up by even bringing the subject up," which seemed to relatively satisfy life for the moment. One man's latest wonder. I wonder if thoughts, rather than being a product of the mind, indeed supersede the mind. Gad, sighed a thought from another galaxy. What could be funner than a well-placed wonder? Only an idiot will tell you what's not possible. And his brother, what's? Today's prescription: eat a watch, starve of space. Taking them into his confidence, the man confided, "I'm illegitimate." And they asked, "How do you know?" And he replied, "Birth to myself." To which they replied, "In that case, you're not merely a bastard, but a stupid one at that." Many thanks, a few thought they heard him reply. Headline, I don't get it. It's to save having to say it after the story. A lad met a wise man, but didn't realize it since the man said nothing. The lad grew up wanting to meet a wise man, but the more he talked about this desire, the more often he met someone who would identify themselves as a wise man. In his older years, the lad became pretty well pissed over the situation, but said nothing about it. If intelligence, as per humans' definition, is the ability to adapt, how can they believe that they are so? Both the reason that you can't answer this question and that humans do not recognize this supra-cerebellum quandary is that rats born into a locked room have no way of ever comprehending the reality of their confinement. And someone asks, if you're not aware of your confinement, are you in fact confined? Yes, you're simply not aware of it. Any more intelligent questions? One man says, I once would study maps of faraway exotic places. Then I began pondering, poring over city maps of my local area. Now I've taken up going out in my yard and walking around. Whenever he'd hear his son use such words as progress and getting somewhere, this one father would wash out his mouth with his mouth. Ordinary minds are fascinated by the mysterious. Extraordinary ones by the commonplace. Headline, listen up time. One guy says, once I knew nothing, then I knew something. Then I knew even more. Then more and more and more and more until I awoke to my real senses and again knew nothing. Thank you for listening to my story, which I didn't tell and you didn't hear. Once more, just a bunch of nothing. But thanks anyway. I knew you'd listen. How do you figure he knew that? Duh. In the effort to teach a course on apples, one man talked incessantly about the fruit until the subject was exhausted. Yet he continued to talk, and the listeners continued to listen. Variation number 1. In the effort to teach a course on apples, one man talked incessantly about the fruit until the subject was exhausted. Then he began speaking of oranges, although he was still talking about the same thing. And someone asked, is there a difference in there not being anywhere to go and in not knowing that there is nowhere to go? Yes, you don't know that there's nowhere to go. Are there any more intelligent questions? Every 24 hours can be seen as a movement from need to need and from want to want, with the few who know what life's about remaining relatively motionless. After the decisive battle is over and victory achieved, the triumphant warrior addressed the long-wearied, but now joyfully relieved yet curious people. I came, I saw, I chilled out. For a man who knows what's going on, if he was told his opinion wasn't worth 2 cents, he'd say, okay, I'll take a penny. When the hour arrived to get up in the morning, one father piped in loud music into his son's room, and always the same song, "What does it take to be a smartass?" with the kid expected to immediately rise while shouting out his response, "Being alive!" Ordinary minds whine over the past and fret over the future, while those who know the mind shake no hands with time. One man had one red eye and one yellow eye, and they would attempt to look at one another. He eventually became cross-eyed and extremely irritable. One man was born in a ravine, but through diligent effort worked his way up to a canyon. One of the explorers yelled back to the main body, "Quick! Over here, I have a piece of something." And one of them yelled back, "But you always have." And he yelled back, "Yes, but I've just realized it." To throw mud at a pig renders you sub-swine. To tolerate its mire makes you his equal. To awaken to the illusionary nature of mental criteria is to finally be superior to someone. Superior to your own mind. And one man thought, sometimes I fear that I'm falling apart. And sometimes I fear not fast enough. One man's latest take on the subject. My me is like a me looking for my me. One man had a well on his property, but continued to have water pumped in. Headline, The Art of Poetry, Reassembled. Not again. Yes, again. The saddest words of tongue or pen are those 4 words, continued. And finally, legend tells of a long ago mystical school, graduation from which required answering the question, do you have any idea what this is all about? The correct response being, none whatsoever.